spent. We have, we've been doing this for 19 years. At the end of every field season, we say, how could the next year be any better, possibly be any better than the year we just completed? And then somehow the next year comes along and it proves to us that it can get better. This site has just been phenomenal. Bill had hoped to find James Fort, but never, and which we obviously did, but never in our wildest dreams could we have imagined finding over 2 million artifacts, numerous wells, numerous buildings. What you're looking at here is yet another building inside James Fort. You're looking at the basement or cellar component to that building. And what we started off in April of whatever year it is this year, right here. This is a 5-foot. When you have twins, you lose track of everything. This is a 10-foot by 5-foot archaeological unit right here. Before we see anything from the 17th century levels, like I mentioned to you over there, we have to dig through some modern layers of fill. In this particular case, this site was bladed down to the level I'm standing at in 1861 to build that Confederate earthwork I spoke of at the beginning of the tour. So they took this soil, they moved it over here. So all the soil that's built up above the level of my feet has to be after 1861. It's all more or less modern. So we got down here in April, and we came down that natural orange subsoil clay here, but right here, we didn't. And I think you can all clearly see how dark, how rich and organic this fill is. That's not natural. That says to us somebody dug a hole here, and they filled it in. And in the case of a cellar, the building above the cellar, obviously at some point in time, something bad's going to happen to it. In this case, it probably rotted away or maybe burned down. And then what do they do with the cellars? They become trash pits. So this is all fill dirt from those trash layers. Anyhow, back in April, we found a corner to it right here. We thought it was probably going to be a cellar. The first thing we do before we dig into these things, though, is we find all the limits to them, or the edges. And I remember thinking, wouldn't it be wonderful if this was about an 8-foot by 8-foot square cellar? Yeah, it'd be a pretty good sized cellar. Well, I got my wish and then some. It's quite a bit bigger than that. It's 25 feet long. So from this is the corner right here, opposite the corner I just showed you under the sandbag. It's shaped, as most of you can tell, like a capital L. So you have this little branch going off over to where Dan Smith is digging over there. Now, what we've been doing for many months is digging out these trash layers, the fill that when they abandoned this. And what we know is the exact year and month that they filled this in. That's, based on the artifacts. Sounds crazy. How could we possibly know that, right? Well, I'll tell you. In 1609, the winter of 1609 to 1610, does anybody know what that winter is famously called to history? Or infamously? Yeah, the Starving Time winter. By some accounts, out of about 500 colonists in this area, only 60 are left alive at the end of that winter. So most people died. And they ate whatever they could get their hands on. Taboo foods went flying out the window or into their bellies. If it moved, they ate it. Okay, so they butchered all their horses. They butchered all their dogs. They ate horses. They ate rats. They ate snakes. There were several reports of cannibalism. And what we're finding in this cellar is we're finding the butchered horse and we're finding the butchered dog. We're finding the stuff that they ate during that winter. Okay, now. Why we could say June 1610 is because the survivors of that Starving Time winter and a group of colonists who get here a little bit late they were shipwrecked in Bermuda. They get here right at the end of that winter. They were lucky to get shipwrecked in Bermuda. They have plenty of food there. By the time they get here 10 months late, the Starving Time winter is already over. But anyway, the interim governor is among those guys. His name is Sir Thomas Gates. He says to the survivors of the Starving Time, enough is enough. We're going back to England. And these guys have got to be like, woo, get out of here. They start on their way out of the James River. Everybody from the colony has left. Okay, they're on their way out. When they run into, it's an amazing sort of moment in time, the new governor for life, Lord Delaware, just before they get out into the ocean, really. And he says, no, you don't, guys. Back to Jamestown you go. We're not going to lose our foothold in the New World, and I've got enough supplies to last us for a year. So these guys, let's just, gotta be kidding me. All right, so they come back here, and Lord Delaware, the second day they're here, which is June 11, 1610, orders the fort to be cleansed. So evidently, they're filling a lot of these cellars in at that moment in time. There must have been heaps of trash all over the place from that horrible winter. We're not just finding the things that they ate during that winter. We're also finding some beautiful artifacts, really. Mariana Richardson here she's been here 9 years with the pink hat. She found a complete ivory sundial compass. And I have a picture of it. And basically an ivory sundial compass is like your 17th century version of this. I shattered the lens on the glass just. And ivory sundial compasses, they can break too. But this, basically, this is how they would tell time. They'd be calibrated for a certain latitude, and you can pass it around. And this had the name of the maker, Hans Miller, who was operating out of Nuremberg, making these things at the time that the colony started. It was an object just like that one. Could have been that one, we'll never know, but an object just like that, that John Smith credits as having saved his life when he's captured by Chief Powhatan's brother up on the Chickahominy River, this way a little ways, in December of 1607. He's up there looking for the Northwest Passage to Asia, which seems laughable now that we know the geography so well. But for these guys, this is a huge river. They don't know how far it's going to go, you know. So he's up there, he gets captured, he pulls out the compass, and he explains to the Chief Powhatan's brother all about the compass, and he decides to spare his life and bring him to his brother on the York River. So anyway, compasses, animal bones. Now there is a cellar adjacent to this cellar, not parallel to this cellar right here. You can see this wood curve here. This is a cellar we already dug, but note its orientation. It's parallel with that. When these things line up with each other, they're almost always contemporaneous. This cellar had a well 16 feet down in the bottom of it. It was a cellar and a well. I like to call it a sweller. They made that one up. When they abandoned this, the well water went bad due to salt water getting into it from the river. They decided to fill it in with trash. 600,000 artifacts we took out of here. Guess what? Lots of butchered dog, horse again. So we're finding parts of the same ceramic pots in both of these pits. So not only were these both in existence at the same time, but they were both abandoned and filled in at the same time. So once we get through these trash layers, we start getting down towards the bottom, and we start to encounter the occupation levels, or the levels that built up while the cellar was in use. And that's very important because those layers of soil teach us about what was going on in this space. So what we're finding, or what we found so far, are 2 ovens that the colonists carved back into the clay walls of the cellar. So Mariana's working on one, Dan Smith's working on one. They both have brick facades in front of them. I know you guys can see that one, you guys can see that one. This brick masonry, by the way, could well be the earliest English masonry in the Western Hemisphere. I haven't fully researched that yet, but it could be. Now, what the colonists did was they carved, back into the clay, kind of like an igloo thing. I think these are going to end up being bread ovens. We have seen that before, but we won't know until we fully excavate into them. The ash that you see all around Mariana's feet is spread all over the cellar here. Is probably from these ovens, okay? And after we dig the ovens, we'll dig into the ash. We'll eventually figure out what's going on in here. I also should add that these are the actual steps leading into the cellar that I just walked up. So the colonists carved these steps into the clay. John Smith would have walked up and down these steps. There's not, and I'm not going out on a limb by saying that. I mean, there's not a whole lot of real estate in this fort. John Smith would have known this cellar. It's only 1.25 acres. Like I said, he would have certainly come in this cellar. So that's kind of cool. Now, I told you this morning, I was digging where Dan Smith is. Holy smokes. And after the oven collapsed, some parts of it didn't collapse until evidently the 1640s, because this is a 1640s period artifact. So this is a Delft tile. They were making these in the Netherlands, and there's earthenware with pin glaze, and each one of them has an individual painting of something happening. This particular one has a guy pushing a cart, and it's maybe he's getting ready for Black Friday after Thanksgiving. But I'll pass it around, or I'll walk around with it. Or actually, Don, if you don't mind showing them this so I can keep jabbering. So Don will show you that. I also found a musketeer shooting a musket. So that's cool because those are individual, unique things, and there's no double. There's not another one. All right, you guys have any quick questions about this before we move on to the burials? I'll take 2 if you got it. Yeah, on the Delft. And if any of you are UVA alum, you got the Cavalier kind of thing going on with the big hat. Yes, sort of see that. Well done. Wow. Hey, Don, you have 2 hands. Alright, we're going to move on to the graves in a second here, but I remembered my Queen story, which is for you. Alright, so the week before President Bush came, the Queen came. The night before, I knew there was a chance I would meet the Queen, and I couldn't sleep, because what on earth am I going to say to Queen Elizabeth if I get a chance to meet her? So I had to come up with a line. I had to be ready. And I decided I would say, "Welcome to James Fort." The reason why, these are the only steps I've ever built. And I built them for Queen Elizabeth to walk down on the site, and she would physically be standing here, which is more or less a 17th century level, so I thought "Welcome to James Fort" would be appropriate. Well, she walks down the steps with my boss, and I got my chance. I blew the beginning part where I was supposed to say "Your Majesty." I think I said "hey" or "hello." And then I did say "Welcome to James Fort." And she did not respond for the longest time. The Queen kind of panned the horizon, looking back and forth. I felt like she was getting emotional. You know, I don't know her too terribly well, but she looked like she was getting emotional. And when she spoke, she said, "Well, thank you so very much. So much has changed in these many years." Now, I immediately knew what she meant by that, though. Her first official state visit to the United States as reigning monarch in her 20s was straight here to Jamestown in 1957 for the 350th anniversary of the founding. So much has changed because back then they told her James Fort had been lost to the river. It had eroded away. And she was back because she knew of this discovery. She had read my boss's book, The Very Truth, and she had seen a UK documentary on our project. So she came back, and it was truly, it's surreal even to think about it now. Like, it just doesn't seem like it really happened, but it was we were very fortunate to get a chance to meet these dignitaries. I keep trying to get them all to come back, but no luck. Queen won't answer my calls. You gotta help me with that. All right, let's go to the, thank you, Don. Let's go to the crosses which are the first burials of 1607.